Hi, I'm Richard from the Data Success team here at Dataedo. Today I'm here to introduce you to changes that have been introduced in Dataedo version 24.2. The first one I want to talk about is actually in the desktop app over here. You may recall in the past, if you wanted to automate your import of metadata from your data sources, you had to save a command file onto your computer and then either run that from the command line, put it in a batch file, put it in Windows Task Scheduler. However you manage that, it was all done outside of Dataedo. We now have a scheduler on board in the Dataedo desktop app, and that is found right here in the ribbon, right there, Scheduler. If I click that, this brings up this window where you have the ability to see your connections up here under Data Sources, and you create tasks around those. You can see down below for each connection, I have a task of importing the changes and refreshing the data profiling. I have those on a schedule that tells when they run each day or each week. You have flexibility about how you set that up. Within that context, you can see what happened over time. Over here on the Executions tab, you can see the results of these tasks and their history. So this gives you the ability to manage the import and refresh of your metadata right here in Dataedo Desktop. There is a lot involved in setting us up, so I'm not going to go into that here. There will be a separate video, and we'll have a link in the description below. But just understand this does exist here now, and it makes your life a lot easier. I have this set up, obviously, and it just happens. The refreshes just happen, and I don't have to think about anything else. So that exists. The next one I want to talk about is Steward Hub, also in desktop. So if I go over there to Steward Hub, you can see the amount of suggestions that are being made here has been increased in this version. In the past, we had just, I believe, glossary, reference data, and domains, I think. We now have some other possibilities here. So just looking at some of these, let's look at, for example, the data model. This has the ability to make suggestions of tables that we have imported from our data sources that do not have a primary key indicated. So it tells us where those are, and we can go and create them as appropriate. In the future, we will also have foreign keys. Another one right here is data roles. This tells us which tables do not have an owner assigned to them. And again, we can assign that. In the domains, this gives us the ability to see which tables have not been linked to a data domain or a business domain. And again, we have that ability to link these. The entire purpose here is to allow data stewards to very quickly get to value, to point out places where there are gaps in the data catalog that you can quickly fill and meet these needs. This is different from what we see in the Dataedo portal now. The content of Steward Hub in portal revolves around workflows. And what I mean by that is when you log in to portal, you log in with a user that is assigned permissions. Now, assuming that is an editor permission, you will be given tasks or presented with tasks that have been assigned to you according to your role, your group. So in this case, I'm signed in as a steward, as a data steward, so I have a lot of tasks available for me according to workflows. But as an example, if I look at this one right here, document two terms in the glossary, if I click on that, it shows me two objects that are ready for me to do the documentation, whether that's to write descriptions or update descriptions or add content to custom fields, whatever that action is, I can do that. And then when it's finished, I move this to the next step of the workflow. There's a whole video talking about how this works and how to configure all of this, so I won't get into a lot of detail here. Just mention that is what you see when you look at Steward Hub. These are tasks that are assigned to you that you need to perform to get these workflows going and to keep them going. The other place where you can see this workflow interaction is if we go to a particular object, for example, this workflow status term. This recently went through the workflow process. You can see it's published right now. But if we look over in community, we can see the history of that development as it went through the workflow process. And you can see each of the people who did something and moved it along in the workflow. So we have that workflow status history in the community for you to look at. There's also notifications that will tell you when objects you are watching have had changes to their workflow status. Now, where does this happen? This is available to people who have admin or data steward privileges. It's right here in data catalog settings. There is workflows, and it's configured right there. So this allows people who have those privileges to configure the workflows. This is the workflow designer, where all of the people who are responsible and the actions that they can take are configured and made available to everyone else who uses the Dataedo portal. Now, the next item I want to talk about is over here in dashboards, right there. And we have now these dashboards that give KPIs or metrics about adoption of your Dataedo instance, both the desktop and the portal. There are two graphs so far. The first one is active users by month. This one is visible by administrators and data stewards, and it tells you the number of people each month who are using each of your apps. The other graph is most active users. This is available only to the administrators, and it tells you by username, how much people are using, how many days people have used this. In this case, in the last 30 days, we can see how active I have been, for example, on both portal and desktop. So this gives you an insight into the adoption of your Dataedo catalog and helps you determine kind of your steps forward to strategize and get more people using your data catalog if that is your goal. Next thing I want to look at is changes to the lineage diagram. Go right here's an example. If I go to the lineage right here, this will look familiar to you. This looks very much like it did before, but we have some new controls up here. So if I give me some more space, as before, I can show and hide columns like that. I can show and hide the processors, the procedures, and the ETL processes that are part of this lineage. So this gives you the ability to have a different view for business people and technical people. The business people probably don't know or care about procedures. They just want to see, how the data is moving from table to table or view or report. It takes out all of those processors to make it more friendly to your business users. And of course, if needed, you can bring those back. The next thing is you can use this inflow and outflow button to increase the size of your lineage until you get end to end. So if I click that inflow, you can see it increases that by 1 and again and again. So you gradually build out that lineage in an easier way than we had before, where we were clicking each of these individually to open them up. Same thing for the outflow. I can open it up and say, I can see how this gets from the data set to the report in this case. So it allows you to more easily get around your diagram. Now, if you wanted to reset this, notice there's not a way to easily collapse these. Just hit that processor's button, and that will reset it back. That's just a little tip. You can trick it into resetting that diagram. The next thing I want to look at is changes to profiling. Not changes to how profiling is shown here. So if I look here, this looks familiar to you. We're in the persons table. We have data insights, which shows us basic information about profiling. Let's go ahead and go into columns. So for example, let's just choose a column here, open that up, and over here, Data Insights has more information than it used to. It also has, right there, that over time choice. So you can open that and see the history of what has happened with the profiling over time. So we have the history in a chart, and we have the number of rows, a couple of charts there. This is sample data, so of course there are no changes over time. But in a real database with live data, those things would change over time, and you could see that change to the profiling and track that, get even more information about your data sources and your content of your databases. The next set of changes I want to talk about here are about changes to the user interface to give you a better user experience. Now, the first one is, you probably remember up here in the upper right-hand corner, there used to be an icon right here that allowed you to toggle between a viewer mode and an editor mode if you had an editor permission. And that is, you toggled that to get into edit mode so you could make changes to the data, metadata here in your data catalog. We no longer have it that way. Now, you just go to the item you want to edit, and you click on the edit icon right there. And that will open that up so that you can edit it, and when you're done, you click off and it saves it. That's available for many of these items where you have the ability to edit something. And of course, you have to have edit permission to do that. But that gives you that ability to quickly edit rather than relying on the toggle button that was up here before. The next one I want to talk about is changes to the overview page here. To show this, let's actually go to this table. And the first change here is, remember in the past, we only had a description. If we had run an AI-generated description, that would appear, but that was all. In other cases, we didn't have it. We now have the source description right here that gives us the text that came in from the data source when you imported the metadata the first time. So this is the text that was provided by the engineers when they created that data source. Now, in this case, you see the description is the same as the source description. This hasn't been changed yet. When it is changed, that change will appear here. And of course, you can see that history of changes. This won't have one, nothing's been changed, but you can see the history of changes over time where that has occurred. And of course, you have the AI generated description there as well. Another change to this overview page, if we go to my persons table, this one shows we also have another section here for columns. So the columns, the first 5 columns are listed here, and you can jump to all of them right there. So you get that quick view into your columns. You also have the classification right there, and this will link to the classification module over here if you click on it. So you have classification. You also have roles. In this case, owner has not been assigned, but I could assign that right there very easily. And it just gives you more information on that overview tab. Now let's go to columns. Right here, we look at the columns grid. Remember, there was some limitation to the functionality of the grid before. And these changes apply to all of the grids in Portal, not only to columns. But we now have the ability to sort these, ascending, descending, as needed. So you can sort your rows within your grid. You can filter, quickly find something that's in that grid. And you also have pagination down here. In this case, everything fits on one page, so it doesn't extend. But if it did extend onto another page, we would have pagination. And note that the sorting happens, it includes all of the pages rather than just the pages, just the items that appear on one page. So it does sort the entire grid, not just the visible portion. So that's a big change that makes grids much more usable. Now, another item here, some of you may have been frustrated by this in the past. If you want to look at these columns, you click on a column, you open the column, you go to it, and you do whatever you need to do. Now, if you wanted to go to the next column in that table, you would have to navigate back to the table, choose the column, open it. Lots of clicks there. We now have this ability to navigate directly to columns. This column switcher allows you to quickly move amongst the columns that exist within this table. So a big time saver there that allows you to quickly move around in these columns. The next change I want to talk about is actually back over in the desktop client, and that is along with the view of those descriptions that I mentioned in Portal, we have that over here as well. So if I go to this person table, notice I do have a tab for description. I have a tab for the source description that came from the data source, and I have a tab for the AI description. If I had run the AI generator and saved it, that description would appear here. Since I have not run it on this table, then I have a link to access that functionality through Dataedo Portal. If I click on this, it actually would ask me to log into Dataedo Portal, and then it would pass that information on to OpenAI and then return that description. But I'm not going to run that. It just know that it exists. It doesn't run directly from Dataedo Desktop. It just accesses the functionality from Portal. In a similar way, if we go to Data Lineage, I don't know if this one has Lineage on it. It does not. Let's find one that has Lineage. Right, here's one. We now also have this Lineage Explorer right here that accesses that through Portal. I would log in here and it would show me the end-to-end lineage diagram that exists in Portal, but it will show it to me here in Desktop. So integration of the two apps to make information that exists in one available to the other one as well. The next thing to talk about here is about the import process. So you recall if you want to import changes, you go here and it allows you to log in. This is the login credentials, same as we've always seen. Once you connect, this has not changed. You have the ability to import from your sources into custom fields. No change there. The change is right here on this screen. Remember, this used to give you a list of all of the objects that were available to be imported. All of your tables, all of your views, all of your procedures. All of those objects were available in a list, and you simply reviewed that long list to select which ones you wanted to bring in or which ones you wanted to omit. You could also use the advanced filters, those advanced settings. You still have that. You can set that up right here. But the big change is right here. You can either just choose always import everything, or you can customize this to where within this you can tell it what to bring in, which data types. So you only, or object types, only bring in the tables, only bring in the views, only bring in the procedures, ignore the functions, whatever. Future schemas means if other schemas are added in the future, so let's say you do not have a sales schema yet, but it's added in the future, you can click this and tell it, yes, when a new schema is added, import from it as well. So it gives flexibility there. Let's look at a different connection here and see what it looks like. Go ahead and connect right here. In this case, we do have schemas in that database. So in this case, we could say for the human resources schema, bring in the tables, views, and procedures and nothing else. Or we could say also include the production schema. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to set these up. Depending on the connector that you're using, this may look a little different. You may have some different choices, but the idea here is the same. You can select exactly what you want to import. Just gives you a lot of flexibility there. All right, and the final item I want to talk about is actually up here in the classification module. For our Canadian friends, we have added the PEPITA regulation, making it much easier for you to document classification for your databases in Canada. So that are the changes that I wanted to talk about. There are other things I have not talked about, like new connectors and changes in the connectors to increase their capability. To review changes on that, I urge you to go to the release notes for version 24.2. We'll put a link in the description so that you can review those and understand all of the changes that have happened. But these are the big ones that deal with functionality and interface. If you have questions about any of these, please feel free to reach out. success@dataedo.com. As always, thank you for using Dataedo, and I look forward to seeing you again.